Multiple bogeys inbound bearing 270. Copy. Activate tracking alert air defense. Tracking engaged, sir.
January 2026, 2 a.m. The Bryansk-Navlia border, Russia. Air raid sirens scream inside a Shahed launch base. One by one, then by the hundreds, Giron-2 drones, Russia's name for the Shahed 136, lift off into the night. Their MD-550 engines howl like a swarm of mechanical hornets racing toward Ukraine. Russian officers believed this wave would tear through Ukraine's air defenses just like every time before. But within minutes, they were forced to destroy their own drones with their own hands. Why? Don't look away. Because in just moments, you'll see the price Russia pays when it is attacked by its own technology. This is the aftermath of Ukraine's theft of the century. The center of this operation is Navlia, a massive Russian logistics hub just 40 miles from the border. And let me tell you, Moscow wasn't pulling any punches. They launched a wave of over 150 Garand-2 units, a massive swarm of loitering munitions designed for one thing: total saturation. If you've never heard of Garand or Shahed 136, imagine a 1970s lawnmower on a heavy dose of steroids flying right over your house. These things are powered by the MD-550 engine, churning out enough thrust to hit 115 miles per hour with a range that can cover 1,000 meters. But the real problem isn't the speed. It's the 90-pound high-explosive payload tucked inside the nose. The Russian High Command had a very specific, very lethal math problem they wanted Ukraine to solve by sending 150 of these flying chainsaws toward Kiev and Sumy all at once. They wanted to force the Ukrainian defense grid into a state of total system overload. In the bunkers at Navia, the Russian officers were feeling pretty good about themselves. They had the numbers, they had the hardware, and they had a plan that looked perfect on paper. But what if Russia were attacked by these very drones? Yes, you heard that right. This is exactly how this theft would happen. At 2:15 a.m., the air raid sirens blared loudly. The Gentle Shepherd, intercepting without explosives. But the Ukrainians were not surprised. Thanks to real-time partisan intel and OSENT satellite data, Ukraine knew this specific shipment from Alebo was fresh off the line. They didn't want to destroy the wave. They wanted to tax it. As the massive swarm Shahed crosses the 1,000-yard mark into the gray zone, the air suddenly fills with a high-pitched electric whine. These are Ukraine's 2026 Stryker generation interceptor drones. At $2,500 apiece, they're basically flying scalpels. But instead of carrying explosives, they're rigged with Gentle Shepherd kits, low-frequency GPS spoofers, and specialized Kevlar entanglement nets. It's like herding wild birds through fog without ever touching them. In a concrete basement dripping with condensation, a 28-year-old pilot we'll call Dima has his goggles strapped on tight. His knuckles are white, clutching the control sticks. On his screen, a grainy thermal image of a Garante's exhaust pipe looms large. He's not looking to blow it up. He's looking to bully it. Ukraine's electronic warfare team starts spoofing the GPS status coordinates. They trick the drone's brain into thinking it's 5 miles off course. While Demema's FPV drone moves in like a high-speed sheepdog, he's hovering just inches from the Shahed's wingtip, using the prop U-by-wash and subtle physical nudges to force the heavy drone toward a soft, east marshy patch in the gray zone. Dima's heart is hammering against his ribs because he knows if he's off by just 3 inches, the kinetic impact will trigger the 90-pound Russian panic, shredding their own fleet warhead. If that happens, the mission is a bust, the tech is vaporized, and he's just another guy who blew up a piece of plywood. He's looking for a selective takedown. He's cherry-picking 4 or 5 units with the smoothest running MD-550 engines. Right when he was most nervous, just 3 miles to Dima's left, the night sky rips open as another FP-5 drone misses the nudge by a hair. Crack. A massive fireball illuminates the forest as the 90-pound warhead detonates, vaporizing the precious MD-550 engine and the interceptor instantly. See, the margins aren't just razor-sawed thin, they're non-existent. While Dima plays shepherd, the rest of Ukraine's defense grid is fighting for its church life. The other 140 Shaheds, the ones not being harvested, are still screaming toward their targets. Suddenly, the earth shakes. 2 miles behind Dimma's bunker, a Patriot battery lets fly. 2 interceptor missiles worth $4 million each roar into the atmosphere, chasing the swarm that's trying to saturate the grid. One Shahed, clipped by debris, loses a wing and tumbles slamming into a border observation post in a violent kinetic event. From the Ukrainian side, Gepard anti-aircraft tanks open up their twin 35mm cannons, spitting out a rhythmic thump, thump, thump that sends lines of glowing tracers stitching through the clouds like neon needles. This is the nightmare of modern multi-domain warfare. Ukraine is now locked in a desperate triple-task survival mode. They have to selective take down the high V-value Alabatech through DMA's FPVs. They have to maintain the high-altitude Iron Umbrella to stop the city killers. And they have to dodge the razor rain, thousands of pounds of falling Russian scrap metal, and unexploded debris that is currently turning the battlefield into a lethal lottery. Every second, the commanders have to decide, do we spend a $4 million missile to save a $10,000 sensor, or do we let the sensor die to keep the missile for the next wave? In 2026, the cost of a mistake isn't just measured in lives, it's measured in the total collapse of the tactical grid. Up in the Russian command center, the mood shifts from celebration to pure confusion. The Panzer radar operators are staring at their screens, watching their drones behave weirdly. They aren't being shot down, they're being hurted. They see the thermal footage of Ukrainian FPVs literally escorting their drones to the ground like a private security detail. The realization hits the Russian commander like a bucket of ice water. They aren't defending, they're harvesting. Panic erupts. The order goes out immediately over the encrypted net. Neutralize the fleet now. Suddenly, the Russian Panzer systems, the very ones meant to protect the swarm, start frantically engaging the Ghost Harvest, SSO, ground recovery, own drones. They'd rather turn their 13 billion ruble investment into scrap metal than let one single MD-550 engine fall into Ukrainian hands. 2:45 a.m. The Russian commanders at Navlia have lost their minds. They stop looking for Ukrainian targets and point every available Panzer S-1 barrel at their own drones. It's a firewall of 30mm lead. They're shredding their own fleet, millions of dollars in tech falling out of the sky in a rain of burning plywood and twisted metal. One Panzer volley tears right through a Garin, too, turning it into a rain of burning plywood. But the tracers keep going, slamming into 2 of Dimma's FPV drones. His screen flashes signal lost in a jagged red font as his high-tech sheepdogs are vaporized by the very people they were trying to outsmart. Inside the bunker, Dimma's sweat is cold. He's down to his last 3 herded targets. He's got one Shahed just 10 feet above the marsh. So close he can almost taste the victory. But then the Russian remote kill command finally punches through a gap in the electronic interference. Boom. The drone Dama, which was gentling to the ground, suddenly undergoes a massive structural failure. A 19-pound high-explosive event erupts just feet from the mud. The shock wave creates a thermal chain reaction that wipes out 3 other nearby Ukrainian FPVs in a single blinding flash. Dimma's goggles go white. He rips them off, his eyes stinging. "They're mass detonating," he shouts. That's the self-destruct mode. Moscow is hammering the detonate button on every serial number in the air. For every drone Ukraine tries to save, 3 more are being turned into falling scrap metal by their own creators. But Dimma isn't done. He grabs a backup controller, hooks into a drone that's already landed in a dead zone where the jammers are strongest. "I've got 4, he whispers his breath, hitching, 4 stable signatures. The Faraday cages are holding. He's managed to land a handful of pristine Alabuga units in a specific shadow zone, shielded from the Russian kill signals. Back at Navlia, the Russian commander is staring at his thermal screen. The air is clear. They've successfully shredded 95% of their own wave. But his heart sinks when he looks at the ground. Through the thermal optics of a Russian Orlan drone, they see it 3 tiny, flickering heat signatures racing across the mud at 60 miles per hour. These are Ukraine's SSO, Special Operations Forces, mounted on V's buggies. These things are basically roll cages with engines built for one thing: high-speed ghost harvests. They're running blacked out, no lights, using high-end NVGs to navigate the treacherous forest floor. They have exactly 15 minutes before Russian artillery turns this entire grid square into a moonscape. Target side at 3 o'clock. The SSO team lead shouts over the comms. He slams the buggy into a drift, stopping inches from a downed Garin 2 that's sitting upright in the marsh. It's a pristine specimen. The MD550 engine is still warm, smelling of high-octane fuel and scorched oil. But this fish has a hair trigger. Moscow is hammering the remote detonation codes every millisecond, trying to turn this recovery mission into a funeral. The SSO, bypassing self-destruct with liquid nitrogen technician, leaps off the buggy, holding a pressurized canister. Nitrogen now. He douses the Shahed's nose cone in a cloud of liquid nitrogen, freezing the chemical fuse and the electronic trigger in a fraction of a second. It's like putting a ticking time bomb in a deep freezer. While the tech works, 2 other operators throw a portable Faraday cage, a specialized high CEA conductivity mesh tent, over the entire drone. Instantly, the link to Moscow is severed. Inside that mesh bubble, the drone is electronically dead. Back at Navlio, the Russian commander is screaming at his console. The signal is flat. Why isn't it blowing? Realizing the Faraday trick, he stops trying to be surgical. He grabs the radio to the heavy artillery batteries. Coordinate grid 44 alpha, flatten everything. The first 152mm shell impacts 200 yards away, throwing a wall of mud and shrapnel into the air. The ground shakes violently. Go, go, go. The SSO team hauls the 50-pound MD550 engine onto the buggy's rear rack. It's a brutal physical struggle. Greasy metal, sharp edges, and the constant fear that the frozen fuse might still find a way to spark. They've got 4 engines, 4 guidance kits. The crown jewels of Alabuga. In the Russian command post, the commander watches the tiny heat signatures of the buggies weaving through the falling artillery shells, disappearing back into the Ukrainian triine. It's the ultimate irony. Too late. Ukraine had already finished the heist and left through the back door. 4 Alabuga engines are now headed to a secret workshop in Kyiv, and Moscow has just realized they've provided the raw materials for their own future funeral. Ukraine didn't leave Moscow waiting for long. Exactly 7 days after the Ghost Harvest, while Russian commanders were still filing paperwork to explain why they shredded their own multi-million-dollar fleet, the stolen tech was already undergoing a Frankenstein makeover in a secret Zampate workshop. The Ukrainians didn't bother copying the Shahed from scratch. That's for people with too much time and not enough war. Instead, they performed what engineers call battlefield jerry-rigging. They took those 4 pristine MD550 engines and dropped them into the airframes of upgraded Beaver long-range kamikaze drones. This was the reverse B strategy. By January 25th, 2026, they had a fleet of 10 the 4 stolen Hearts and 6 other drones with Donor 8 upgrades. These weren't just copies, they were version 2.0. The Ukrainians added specialized Frankenstein engineering, building version 2.0 anti-jamming firmware. Think of it as rooting an Android phone to bypass the manufacturer's restrictions, and modified the exhausts to be slightly quieter while maintaining that signature Shahed lawnmower drone. 3 a.m. Navlia launch base. The Russian radar operators are bored, staring at the same green sweeps they see every night. Suddenly, 10 acoustic signatures pop up on their sensors. The sound is unmistakable. The low, guttural thrum of the MD550. The junior operator shrugs. Must be some of our birds wandering back from a failed nav route, he mutters, because the sound matched their own fleet's acoustic fingerprint. The automated acoustic triggers didn't sound the alarm. It's like a security guard letting a thief in because the guy is wearing the company uniform and humming the company song. But as the drones dipped below 100 feet, screaming toward the Navia launch ramps at 120 miles per hour, the Russian commander realized the reverse B was already in the room. By the time the Panzer systems tried to lock on, the drones weren't looking for cities, they were looking for the very ramps they had launched from a week prior. Contact. One drone slams directly into a row of loaded Shahed launch racks. The resulting thermal event is massive, a chain reaction of fuel and high explosives that lights up the Bryan sky like midday. But Moscow isn't sleeping. Within seconds of the first fireball, the Navalia base erupts the boomerang attack on Navlia in a frantic, desperate defensive response. One Panzer commander, realizing he's being hunted by his own technology, overrides the automated friend or foe filters and begins blind firing into the smoke. He manages to catch one of the modified beavers in a crossfire of 30mm shells, shredding the stolen MD-550 engine midair in a spray of sparks and fuel. But while the Russians are fixated on the loud, screaming bees in the sky, they've left the back door wide open. In the shadow of the massive smoke plumes and the deafening secondary explosions, a secondary swarm. 20 low-cost, high-speed FPV kamikaze screams in from the tree line at ground level. These aren't long-range harvests. They're the cleanup crew. They weave through the burning wreckage of the launch racks like mechanical wasps, ignoring the main fires to target the high V-value nervous system of the base, the fuel tankers, the mobile command vans, and the power generators for the radar arrays. The resulting thermal event is massive. A violent chain reaction of high-octane fuel and 90-pound warheads that lights up the Bryan sky like a second sunrise. Through the blinding white light of the cook-offs, two more long-range drones, the final stolen hearts, use their high-precision optical guidance to navigate through the black soot. They ignore the easy targets and dive straight into the very Panzer batteries that had fired on Dima's FPV 7 days earlier. The Russian officers at Navlia were in a state of pure, unadulterated shock. They were being hit by the literal ghosts of their own equipment. It was a psychological meltdown. How do you defend against a weapon that sounds like your own, looks like yours on radar, but carries a Ukrainian message inside the warhead? Moscow had to freeze all Shahed operations across the northern border for 48 hours just to figure out how to tell their own drones apart from the boomerangs. You see, Russia thought they were being clever by destroying their own house to keep the neighbors out. But Ukraine just took the burning wood, carved it into a spear, and threw it right back through the front window. It's the most expensive return to sender in military history. Ukraine didn't just win a battle at Navia. They turned Russia's best weapon into a psychological liability that Moscow can no longer fully trust. So here's the big question for the Kremlin. When the next wave of jet-powered Garin 5s takes off, will they be heading for Kiev, or are they just the next recruits for Ukraine's reverse B fleet? Drop a comment below and let me know. Is this the ultimate military reverse card, or just the beginning of a whole new era of drone theft? And hey, if you want to see how Ukraine mods the next piece of Russian tech, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Catch you in the next